Live.
Hey,
There was a bit of scrambling around backstage in the green room to make sure all of the connections were made. So if anyone was waiting for us, there's nobody on the chat just yet, but yeah, we've got one viewer.
okay.
But if anyone was waiting and then gave up, we're here now. I'm Andy Williams. This is my Creatively Curious Substack, and I'm here with the brilliant Robert Chandler,
Hello there.
fantastic producer, director, and writer. Hi, Robert. Thanks
Hi,
for
Andy.
joining the
Good to
Substack.
see you. Yeah,
How you doing?
thank you. And again, apologies for that delay. It's guaranteed you get two screen professionals together, and something will go wrong with the technology. It's all on
Yes,
me, of course.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Where's the engineers when you need them? That's the problem with
exactly.
this new era. Us producers and directors don't have lots of technical staff to be
No,
able
no,
to
we have to do everything.
support us. Yeah. Um, One of the first things I'm doing with each of the guests that we have on is asking for their origin story.
Yes.
And that's kind of basically what got them into their career, what kind of ignited the love of their kind of profession or film or TV, animation, whatever. So, what would your origin story be?
Well, I'll keep it short because it's quite a weird and winding road, actually. One thing I knew from a very early age was that I wanted to be a movie producer or run a studio or make films in some form. And when I was young, that wasn't really a possibility, frankly. There was no film industry to speak of in the UK outside of a small club of people making films. The
Right.
broadcast route was an obvious one, but very hard to get into if you know, like me, come from a working class background, basically, and aren't already have a member of the family in there, or didn't go to Oxbridge, which was the traditional route to get into the BBC. And so I've had to sort of scramble around, and it's been a strange journey, which I used to actually be quite angry about because it was taking so long.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I learned so much on all different aspects of making things for people to watch, whether it's marketing, writing, understanding finance and what people want when they invest in something. So all of those things through the corporate route, through the, I mean, I set up the Mercury Music Prize in 1992. Understanding what the sponsor wanted, as well as the artist, as well as the
Yeah.
music industry, as well as the viewers watching TV, and generally, and never treating one as more important than the other. Maybe the artists, the musicians, you know what I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
but at the same time, not being naive or high and
Neither
mighty about.
exists kind of without the other, really. I'm just
No,
kind of
that's
saying
right.
neither
You
of
know,
those elements exist without the other. So they're all kind of very important.
they're extremely important, and it's part of the, you know, as you know, you're a producer yourself, it's something you have to constantly navigate, um, trying to make anything, but whether it's theatre, release a graphic novel, set up a feature film, make a television series, all those sorts of things. It's a lot of work that goes into getting to a place where you are able to set those things up, but then
Yeah.
a lot of work actually getting them set up, and that does involve listening to all the parties involved and trying to hold on to what's precious about that project in the first place. So my route to here was left school, tried to go to art college, failed. I talked too much about films and not about fine art, which is really what they were looking for. Fair enough. Working as a commercials props buyer through a friend of a friend who got me a job as a driver, and then
Right.
going into the corporate, which was a place. It's quite easy to frown upon it, but at the same time, there was nowhere else where you could actually get a camera and make stuff. So I did that through the corporate route, and then started making a series for Japanese television about music, and then was asked by the music industry if we could do something to kind of create a Booker Prize for the music industry, and that became, you know, that was successful, and that became the Mercury Music Prize, which started in 1992, which for me was a brilliant. I was directing videos for bands. I was the creative director, and all the multi-camera live events, the co-producing with the BBC, and so on and so on. So I was able to sniff that I was getting closer to the objective of being a filmmaker, whether it was making a little video for Apache Indian or Barry Adamson, you know, or Suede, or whatever, and just, or directing Van Morrison, you know, in a multi-camera shoot. It was just a way for me to actually get to make stuff that felt vital and was talked about and that sort of thing. And from there, Andy, I was asked. I did work for as an independent for the BBC, making television programs. People saw that I had a knack for drawing and art, and weirdly, Pete Waterman, the pop producer, asked me if I would run an animation studio that he was investing in. It was a strange connection, but I leapt at, and I ran the animation studio for a while. And then from there pivoted into setting up my own company, Space Age Films, which is where I am now. I think we're 20 years old.
That's amazing. And I kind of always, I'm always struck by, I think Charles Darwin didn't say it was survival of the fittest. He said it was survival of the most adaptable. And I think maybe the route that you've taken, I sometimes wonder whether that college and university route sets up a very fixed destination for people, whereas careers and life is much more of a crooked journey, really, that kind of involves adapting to opportunities and circumstance rather than there being a fixed point in the distance that you're aiming for. So maybe your route, even though it was frustrating, is the more sort of valuable route in the end. Well, just to kind of very quickly talk about the origin story, Elliot Grove, who was is the founder of Raindance Film Festival, his origin story was going into a movie theatre and seeing Lassie as a child, and his family and the religion that he grew up with had banned going to the cinema. They saw it as being a sin. So that was like a kind of Damascus-like event for him, seeing Lassie at the cinema. Do you remember when you fell in love with film? What was the thing that really kind of sort of caught your interest and kind of inspired that love?
It was seeing a double bill of Planet of the Apes and Escape from the Planet of the Apes. They missed out Beneath, and I remember thinking, "No, that's the wrong double bill," even though I was about 10 years old. And they were re-released. Please don't think it was on the first release. At Lewisham Odeon as a double bill, and I've always been had a feeling for fantasy as a means of telling stories about truths. You know, I don't regard it as escapism, for example. And so absolutely falling in love with those two films, the humor of Escape when she rejects the banana. And, you know, even then I was aware that was Kim Hunter, and Kim Hunter had been in A Matter of Life and Death. So I'd always had this sort of, I don't know, Andy, I don't know what it was. It was maybe before film there was Marvel Comics. Again, I know you share this sort of passion as a means of fantastical escape. Escape's not the right word because that just contradicts what I said earlier, but a means of exploring who we are as people, especially when you're a young person, a teenager, a child, and reading comic books and not just appreciating the problems that Spider-Man had to face, that Peter Parker had to face, but also very early on being aware that I loved the artwork and I could draw, and I've always drawn people and humans, and Marvel Comics were artists attempting to basically draw other people, and I always saw them as that. Um, and, and and so I would be copying them, drawings of various characters until I could do it myself without copying them, and then just putting the human form in different strange positions, which superheroes do naturally, but which most regular people don't. But that gave me this sort
Yeah.
of
I mean,
feeling for art.
I likewise loved kind of Marvel comics because I think they ended up being both they were both relatable and aspirational. Do you know what I mean? Which as a teenager,
Yeah.
those two aspects are kind of very appealing, really. I was reminded of your comment on escapism.
Oh, yeah.
It reminds me of I think C.S. Lewis defended escapist literature with the line, "The
Yeah.
only people that despise escape are jailers."
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Um,
that's a nice line. I just don't
yeah, I
ever
mean,
see it. Sorry.
yeah, and I think kind of to elaborate on his point, he felt that escaping into a different fictional world allowed you to kind of see your own world from a different perspective.
I mean, it has to. That's the job. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't read it.
Yeah.
You know, I never ever regard it as escapism, whether it's an MGM musical, or an intense, 9-volume science fiction fantasy epic. Unless they're about people, they won't sustain. People won't be reading
Oh,
them
yeah, absolutely.
decades.
Absolutely. Moving on from that, one of the things, so
Yeah,
you've just returned from Cannes Film Festival.
yeah,
And
yeah,
another sort of question format that I've used before is to kind of look back on the first time you did something and how things have changed in the present. So you've been to Cannes a number of times,
yeah,
and
yeah. I don't know how many.
and what was the difference from Cannes when you first went there, and the market and the I don't know the buzz around film, to the realities of Cannes now? How would you describe that kind of difference?
Well, I think there are two differences. One is how Cannes itself has changed, and the other is how I've changed. So the first time I went to Cannes, I
Yeah.
hadn't made a film. I went with the intention of trying to have meetings and trying to set up a film, trying to attract a sales company, trying to, put a film together. And it was one was in awe of the location, because I just immediately think of To Catch a Thief, and the films that have been shot on the south coast of France, and so I was in awe of it with stars in my eyes, of course. But then the reality of trying to meet sales companies, having meetings changed at the last minute, and all that sort of stuff. 15 years later, I enter quite differently, and as a producer, and if I may say it, a sort of semi-successful producer. And so people,
Yeah,
you
and
have to
you
almost
should,
have to.
just give us a brief description of the show, of the movies that you're going to Cannes with now.
Well, I've been in Cannes before, with a film that we screened, and that the distributors, as one said, it's a beautiful film, but we can't buy it. It's too scary. It was a children's and family film. And so I had to recut it that night in my hotel room, in Jean Le Pand, to meet what the financiers were asking for. So that was a fraught Cannes. This Cannes, just gone, was much more relaxed because there was nothing at stake for me. I didn't have any films they're showing, or anything really selling. We were promoting one film. There's another film that's already pre-sold and it's in production. So really I was there to have meetings, catch up with people, talk to sales companies. So a big part of being an independent producer is finding the right sales company. And invariably they either come from the UK or from Europe. And so I use Cannes as a way of meeting up with my Belgian, German, French colleagues, sales company friends, and so on. And so this Cannes for me was more relaxed because, like I say, I didn't have anything at stake. I wasn't showing anything or pre-selling anything, and that makes a big difference when you go to Cannes. It can be quite. You almost can't enjoy it if you've got something, if you're screening something.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean,
you got the weight
I
of that
sharing
expectation on your shoulders. And so you're currently in production on The Amazing Maurice 2. Is that correct, or is that
2?
Yeah. And
that's it, 2 films.
And how has that been because that's a kind of a UK production, or a European production, isn't it?
Yeah, UK, German.
Yeah. And has that been easier, that kind of road, because you've already got the original there? Has the sequel been plain sailing, or has it been still had its challenges?
It's had its challenges, some of which was ambition, but with it being a second film, I immediately thought, oh God, we can spend more money, we'll have more money, we can go bigger with the story. And then we found that the market was still sort of declining, which it has been for some time now. And so really for the second film, we could only raise as much. And our sales company, Epsilon in Germany, did a fantastic job of getting pre-sales in, but against a fairly sharp decline in what people were offering. And so we ended up with a similar budget to the first film. So I'm not complaining about that at all. It's still a nice, healthy budget. It just meant we had to be really smart in how we spent that to make it look a little bigger than the first film, because it does have a bit more scope. I call it Simbadian, in that it's a journey on the water to find something precious, which then must be returned. And of course, along the way, they meet various obstacles. I mean, I love the film. We're halfway through now, and it's quite exciting. It'd be interesting to see whether we can show anything. I don't think we'll be able to show anything at Annecy, but certainly we'll be able to start showing things from the AFM which is November this year.
Great.
I should remember.
And talking about Annecy, there's a film that we'll be showing there that we're both involved in, which is Vi Queens.
Queens. That's the other film in production. I mean, that was fun in Cannes because that was being promoted there. We announced just before Cannes. I know you know all this, Andy, but I'm obviously saying it for everyone. The addition of the footballer Erling Haaland to the cast, and then the following day his team won the FA Cup. Man City won the FA Cup, which was a really nice timing. And so that was
and I think the top goal
scorer
as well this year.
Is that right? I mean, think so. I don't know. So. But I at home now, of course, I tell my family that he's my friend. Anyone I've worked with in a film.
Yeah, my daughter was very excited, but only so long as it wouldn't hamper Arsenal's chances.
Right, and Arsenal, they won, didn't they?
Yes,
they won the league. Yes, they did.
They did.
So yeah. Vi Queens was being promoted. Our Norwegian producers, they had cosplayers walking down the Croisette dressed as the Vi Queen characters. The Rita Ora, Ella Purnell, and Alan Carr characters in the film, they created these masks and had actors walking down the Croisette handing stuff out. It was a lot of fun, and it's
kind of what you want
way of promotion.
That's what you kind of want to do in Cannes, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, one of the things that strikes me with a lot of European films, even ones with a kind of broad, quite a commercial point of view, which I think both of the movies that we're discussing are unapologetically commercial and trying to be broad, kind of entertaining. entertaining movies. They're the antithesis of that. Not that these films are always bad, but that kind of sometimes closed club of um, movies that are more kind of on the art house scene,
Yeah,
and kind of really don't. They're funded through grants and
yeah,
support. They don't necessarily have to pitch to a massive audience for their survival. But I think
that's
these
right.
two
Whether
movies
it's
very
live,
much operate in a that they need to kind of please they need to please the crowd
yeah.
and appeal to people. And
Well, I've got to say, Andy, that I'm sort of an anti-snob in that I love commercial cinema, just like I love pop songs and pop
yeah,
music, and I think that's much harder to make than art house stuff. I mean, I just feel I could do that, make an art house movie. That's not that difficult because it isn't. But making something that's big, commercial, and recoups, there's obviously more at stake because it'll probably have more money behind it. But that doesn't mean it's easier. That actually means you've got more of a responsibility as a producer to return
absolutely.
that.
And
And you know, go on.
and
Sorry.
what's your view on how is the market um for European films that want to kind of pitch to more of a kind of a mass market? Um, is it is it easier? Is it more difficult? Is there space opening up for those independent but commercial voices outside of the US? What's your kind of take on that? What's your gauge?
Yeah, that's a mighty subject. It can put you in a slightly false sense of security because it can basically loves European cinema, and especially this year as there weren't any streamers really attending, and the American studios didn't make too much of a fuss about it,
Right.
and so it do what it used to in a way, which was celebrate European cinema. And as soon as you say European cinema, you sort of automatically go to a sort of more, I guess, an intellectual
Yeah,
level of
you're thinking
cinema
Truffaut,
than one,
Godard.
yeah, than with Hollywood. Even though I don't subscribe to that, I think there's popular cinema in Europe, and there's popular cinema in Hollywood, and there's art house cinema in
Yep.
Hollywood. But I do feel there was a sense of, I mean, for example, I was delighted that Nicholas Winding Refn was showing a film at Cannes, and I couldn't go to see it just because of workload. But I just thought, yeah, this is the sort of filmmaker we should be celebrating.
Yep.
And I love that about Cannes. I think, and you know me, I'm not a snob, nor am I, and I call myself an anti-snob. I just have a generally universal love for all of it because it's all people trying to say something, and trying to entertain, which is not a
Yep.
dirty word. While saying something about the human condition. Oh my gosh. But I mean, I look for that in a children's animated movie, you
Oh,
know.
totally. Yeah, you look for that.
Yeah,
You
the
can
first
you can find that in Pixar and Disney
you can,
and
you can.
the big some of the biggest movies. So I think yeah, there's no contradiction in that. I don't think. Were there any kind of big was there any movies that were attracting a lot of buzz? What were the films that everyone was talking about that kind of you were getting I don't know, a kind of sneak preview of kind of the buzz that might be generated once
Yes.
they're on release?
And I've got to say, a lot of it was me just reading about it in the
Right.
following day in Deadline Hollywood, only because I like I say, I go to the market first and the festival second.
Yeah.
This time I saw no films at all, and the two I was interested in, one was the Nicholas Winding Refn film, and the other was the restoration of Ken Russell's The Devils.
Oh, right. Yeah. Right.
From the early 1971, and that's been restored and showing. But equally, there was a sort of 20th anniversary restoration of, if that's possible, of The Fast and the Furious, the first
Right.
Rob Cohen film. So I thought, okay, that's interesting that's being embraced. All the talk was really about club kid,
That's what I was going to ask you
which
about that.
I
What is
didn't.
that then?
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, Andy. I have to say, when you enter Cannes, although there's all the press and it gets talked about stuff, unless you spend all your time, reading, talking about what's going on in the festival. So I can't really say too much about it, other than that was the buzz,
Right, and I
which
think
is,
that I believe that was picked up by
not told
A24,
about
wasn't it?
it. Yes, it was. And as soon as A24 picks it up, it gets even bigger buzz, because it's quite nice for a distributor to have a brand as such.
Yeah.
A lot of the press down there was about John Travolta's appearance and how he looked, and I thought he looked fab.
I thought he looked great, and also he's in his early 70s. He still looks
Yes,
incredibly nimble, and
yeah,
and healthy for a man
yeah.
of his
I,
years.
I, what I would like to talk about, Andy, is
Yeah,
it was almost my main takeaway from Cannes, and this is quite animation biased or
yeah,
based, and it was basically the pre-sales for animated films are going down all the time.
right.
And it struck me. I had people telling me that there was that one film, for example, they wish they'd taken the deal that was offered last year, and they felt
Right.
that once we complete a bit more of the film, we'll be able to get more as a pre-sale. But actually, even though they completed more and it looked great, the sale price went down. So it's a bit like, when do you sell something? And
Yeah.
expanding the market that way, and that's a very difficult terrain for sales companies. That it makes them more risk averse, and so I was thinking a lot about sales companies in this Cannes. What basically, because the prices are coming down in terms of pre-sales, we still want to make movies. We still want to make animated movies. So how do we do that? There was one, let's talk about one film. When I started
What's
took a decade.
driving that downward pressure on sales?
That's a good question. I don't know whether it's just the sort of spreading out of how people watch films, people not going to the cinema as much, even though people write about the youngsters are returning to the screens. I just assume they just would rather be at home watching stuff on Netflix or Sky or whatever service they use. I just don't know, but there's a fear out there about investing in film, and that shows itself with the lowering price of minimum guarantees from distribution companies. And then what happens is you get a sort of risk aversion from the sales companies, who then don't like your films to have sort of too many awkward bits in them. And of course, as a filmmaker, the awkward bits or make films alive and are vital. Whereas the sales company want you to sort of sand out all the awkward bits, just because they're worried about what the distributors are going to think. And so what's happening is the prices.
A writer was talking about preview rooms, and he said the problem with them is that you'll get the notes back, and you'll get the notes back, and the stuff that will divide people. So like, people will have strong opinions about, like, I hated this bit. So you'll kind of remove that, or you'll change that. But the problem with it is that often the bits that people hate are the same bits that other people love. And so all of your changes kind of basically are funneling your movie into the middle. So it's entirely non-offensive, but nobody can love it or hate it.
And Andy, I've been there. I've had to make cuts to a film that we couldn't sell, and when I made the cuts, every distributor bought it. And even though I didn't like making those cuts, because I felt I was cutting out all the stuff that was spiky or thorny or interesting, they all bought it. So what do? You make the cuts, and what's happening now is people are pre-cutting, so they're sort of smoothing them down before they even get to the awkward stage. Or you find, then I think, well, okay, how can we smuggle this in? It's a bit like the Hays Code. Okay, we're going to cut out all sort of sense of anything risque in American cinema. So how do we smuggle it in? Let's do it through metaphor. Maybe something. I'm so optimistic, you can hear it. If there's a barrier, I'll find a way to sort of be optimistic about it.
So what do you think that means? What's your kind of take on what that means for animation then currently? Do you
Well, this
think
is,
people are going to have to find ways to bring costs down further, to operate under the radar of that,
I
that
think
more
that's,
kind
I
of
think that's,
safety first point of view?
I think that's essentially it, Andy. I think what I took away with some strength was against a backdrop of 5 or 6 big animation studios closing in the UK. I thought, okay, so 10 years ago, we'd expect $18 million to make a movie. 4 years ago, that came down to sort of 12 or 10 million. Now it's like, what can you do for 6 to 8? And
Right.
so and of course, the producer, you want 12 million, you are able to raise 8, you make the film for 8, you make the film. What will happen is invariably studios will have to embrace AI. They just will, because how else can you make that 6 million look like 12? And of
Mm.
course, AI is a dirty word for many people. They'll be doing it secretly, but they'll still be doing it. One of the biggest sort
I
of
mean,
selling is,
I had the producer, and agent Ollie Hayes on the podcast last week, and he talked a
yeah,
little bit about AI, and his view was that, well, one, it's that you're going to get more and more companies that effectively ring fence AI, so they're not using cloud-based AI, they're using AI more kind of that they have control over what gets
yeah,
put
where it
into it,
goes. Well,
so it's not scraping uncopyrighted material,
yes,
um, and and that it will be used for stuff like backgrounds and
yep,
effectively kind of digital extras
yeah,
and and backgrounds and areas where you can use AI to sort of amplify what's being done already. It doesn't mean that it addresses people's concerns about job losses, because the AI is kind of
yeah,
it will be replicating a job that somebody did.
exactly.
But if it then makes more animated movies and series achievable, then ultimately it's only replacing a job that wouldn't exist if if it didn't exist, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does. Absolutely. I think you know this, but I gave myself a sort of challenge over the past year to draw 14 panels from an animated 11-minute short
Yeah.
uh, called Untethered, the one about the astronaut drifting off. And I thought, this as an exercise, if I draw these 14 panels, and this was me being a bit pretentious doing the Stations of the Cross for the journey this astronaut has, but I'm doing the drawing, so I create the look of the thing.
Yeah.
And then what do I do? Do I then spend 2 years, trying to raise a bit of finance for a short film, which will never make money? It'll only be shown at festivals or online, and getting an animation studio behind me to help animate it, or 5 years doing it myself, or I can do it in AI over a month, and then pull favors from actors to do the voice and a composer. Of course, I mean, I haven't done that. I haven't made that decision yet, but I kind of did those drawings in order to give myself the challenge, just to get inside the mindset of should
Yeah, and
should I use
yeah,
AI?
absolutely. I did a little bit of testing with
I
some
remember you
AI
doing
where
that.
I used kind of
Yeah,
some drawings that I'd done originally and asked it
yeah,
to do versions of that, to replicate that, to create its own 3D version of it. Some of it was interesting, some of it seemed very generic. Um,
yes,
but the stuff that uses those illustrations and effectively uses that as their data set to then replicate. I think, I mean, I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't assume that Disney is already doing that.
yeah. I know studio execs are. I know studio execs are. They're not reading screenplays. They never have. They used to give them to readers for coverage. Now an
I used
AI
to I used to know somebody that
summarize.
I think he used to weigh the scripts rather than read them. Um,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and
so
no,
if the script
absolutely.
had a lot of heft.
Yeah, in the bin. I mean, I've been in those rooms in Hollywood, which are wall to wall with scripts, with all the
Yeah,
names sort of written sort of rather desperately on the spines of all these sort of white papers. It's like a sort of castle of despair, and you can go in there. And in fact, it was one of the things on this weird road. I was doing some work for Madonna's company. I'd written an animated the thing that she liked, and I went over to her company, Maverick, and I just saw this room full of scripts, and I thought, oh my god. And I just, that's when I thought, you have to produce your own stuff, because if you rely on other people to do it, it will just sit in one of those rooms forever.
yeah,
um, unless it's so exceptional. And of course, I don't think I am so exceptional. I'm just passionate and energetic, and slightly well, obstinate or tenuous. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
But
I think persistence and determination
it
are kind
is.
of key
Yeah,
attributes for a producer, and that's something that's definitely one of your skill stacks, which I think being a
yeah,
good producer involves having a stack of complementary skills. But I think determination and passion and grit are
yeah.
definitely in the mix there.
I mean, you can see from my room, it's more than art to me. It's just so vital. Um, yeah, I'm almost speechless about it. So it sort of, it gives me the fuel, the idea of contributing something to cinema before I die. I just find that such a drive, such a
Yeah,
lovely
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah,
So even
yeah.
though I wake up in the middle of the night, often, I did that wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have made that cut. It's still out there, and it's you know, when you get letters, occasionally emails from people who've responded to something you've helped either set up or make or be part of. It's a lovely feeling.
Yeah, that's really gratifying. I remember when I was at Disney, we did a puppet hosted show with a character
Yeah,
that Henson's Workshop built and designed. But we'd get letters in where kids would say they loved the main character of Raoul because he was different and they feel different too. Um,
it's,
and and those kind of things, yeah, you kind of you're even if it is yesterday's papers and it's used for fish and chips the next day, that
that's right.
at that point it's made an impact and touched somebody and connected with somebody, and I'm sure that Spider-Man comics were considered something that people would forget about in 2 weeks' time,
Thrown away. Yeah.
but yet we're still talking about them now.
Yeah, and on that note, this sounds a bit shameless, but two of the films I've got in development. One is with the Jim Henson Company, and
Yeah,
there's one is with Anderson Entertainment, which is basically the
amazing.
Jerry Anderson brand, being managed by his son Jamie, and of course both of those are part of the childhood. Or my childhood, and so the Muppets, I could see how important they were. Sesame Street, how brilliant that
Yeah,
was, and Jerry Anderson, I described him in the press release as our sort of the UK's Irwin Allen, just for the American viewers and readers. But the Stingray, Thunderbirds, UFO, Captain Scarlet, those series. Many broadcasters did think they were like once or maybe a repeat a bit later, but often they were, well, what the BBC was like, used to can destroy or tape over. They were just considered ephemeral, but the way Thunderbirds has sustained is quite remarkable. And so the idea now of making a film with Jerry's son, which we announced in Berlin in February, from a story that Jerry Anderson wrote, is such a great honor. And of course, the trick with that is to make it feel contemporary and alive today or tomorrow. And that's something else I
abs-
wanted to say. Sorry, Andy, I was just going
yeah,
to say, as a producer, what you mustn't ever really be is old-fashioned, and you mustn't be sort of artificially young either. You have to acknowledge how old you are, but you do have to be aware of how things are changing. And I say this because there's this accusation of wokeness or the diversity and authenticity and representation, and then there are some people they just don't get it. And all these, the evolution of the way we think about art and culture is so important as a producer to sort of tap into that and understand where it's coming from and how you can help contribute to this evolution is really important. So
Yeah.
I
I mean,
want to make sure I bring those to the film.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think when you're talking about the Muppets and Anson and those movies as well, you're able to kind of bring them forward. And I think
Yeah,
one of the things that you have as a
exactly.
producer is that the Muppets and those kind of cherished shows, they kind of live in the hearts of the fans ultimately. And I think they live in the heart of you as well as a producer, and you're able to reflect that, but also kind of bring it forward and make it more up to date. But it's been great to be able to chat. So thanks for joining my weekly Substat Live. And
Are we coming to an end now?
we're going to
45.
wrap up here, but we've
Oh, brilliant! I thought we had another couple of hours.
we'll have
No,
to
I know,
continue that conversation
but obviously,
um, once on the other side of the Substack. But thanks very much for chatting with us, Robert.
not at all. I hope
It's
it
been
was
great.
entertaining.
Yeah, it's been really good.
Thank you.
And good luck with all of the movies, particularly the one that I'm also involved in.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
speak to you later. Thanks, mate.
All right, mate.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.